it's Jamie from Not So Wimpy Teacher, and today I want to chat briefly with you about how to do a pre-assessment for writing. So when I first started teaching writing, I did not do pre-assessment. So if you've never done a pre-assessment, don't feel bad. I would say that a lot of people don't bother doing the pre-assessment. I didn't understand the real value in doing a pre-assessment until much later in my career when I realized that it's important for me as a teacher to know where all my students are starting at. It's important that I understand which lessons we need to spend the most time on. I can make changes to my pacing guide if necessary. If I'm looking through their pre-assessments and I realize, well, most of them already use this skill, then I'm not going to spend an entire whole group lesson on it. Instead, I could just move it to conferences for those who don't. Most of the time in a pre-assessment, though, what I find is, oh my gosh, wow, we have a lot to do. My students need everything. So the real big value from the pre-assessment for me is that there's a baseline. Here's a mistake that I was making as a writing teacher. I thought that the way I would know that my students had succeeded in a writing unit, such as informational or personal narrative, was that at the end, they would do an assessment and they would all get a passing score. And then I would know, like, okay, that unit went well. But that's awesome. I would love for that to happen. Every single time I teach a unit, I want every single one of my students to score high, right? 8, 9, 10 on the rubric. But the reality is that all my students don't start in the same place. So there's no way that I can expect them to end in the same place. And that's just true of education in general, right? We need to know where our students start so that we can truly tell, are they growing? At what pace are they growing? Because they're not all going to be at the same spot at the end of a unit or a grade level. But if I know where they started and I can tell how far they've grown, then I can help to encourage and motivate them by showing them their growth. But it also helps me to see it's working. It might be working a little slower for this student than this student, but it's still working. So it's really, really important that you take the time to do a pre-assessment at the beginning of each one of your writing units so that you have that baseline score. So that at the end of the unit, when you do your end of unit assessment, you will be able to compare the two scores to say, you know what, they are not at grade level yet, but they have come so far. And that is worth celebrating. So pre-assessments are just getting that baseline for your students. I also use the scores from pre-assessments to help me choose their writing groups because I like to do group conferences. So that's another benefit. Here's how to do a pre-assessment in writing. First of all, you need to do one at the beginning of each one of your units because every type of writing is different. Just because a student does really well informational doesn't mean they're going to do great in fiction narrative. They require very different skills and strategies. So I do 4 different large units throughout the year. It's personal narrative, informational, opinion, and then fiction narrative. And I'm going to do a pre-assessment at the beginning of each one of those units. It's the first lesson we're going to do. My second tip for you is to give a very, very simple prompt for this pre-assessment. And you know I'm not a big fan of prompts, but it's really important you give a prompt for a pre-assessment because you haven't taught any of the lessons yet. They don't necessarily know that much about the genre or how to generate a topic. So if I told them, hey, we're about to start opinion writing. This is your pre-assessment. Write me an opinion essay. A lot of them are going to say, what's an opinion essay? I don't even know what that is. You might end up with some personal narratives. So that's not going to help me get a baseline. Instead, I'm going to give them a prompt that everyone could answer without doing any research. So make sure you think about your class and a prompt that's appropriate for everyone in your class because it could be different. One teacher may be able to use the prompt of what is your favorite holiday and why, where another teacher knows she has students in her classroom who don't celebrate holidays, so that wouldn't be an appropriate prompt. Choosing a prompt where they don't have to do research is pretty important. It's hard to do research during a pre-assessment. So if you're doing an informational unit, that gets to be tricky, right? I suggest choosing a topic that is a recent social studies or science skill that you've just finished. You know, if you just did a unit on the Civil War, perhaps they need to write an informational report about something to do with the Civil War or a science unit. All right, so choosing a simple prompt is important. Number 2, or I guess this is number 3, go ahead and give a time limit. Don't let them have as much time as they want to, because here's what's going to happen. Someone is going to spend about 2 weeks on this, and you don't have 2 weeks. You need to get this done. I recommend one day, one writing period, so maybe 40, 45 minutes tops. Now don't be surprised. You are going to have a student or 2 or 10 who finish in 5 minutes. Don't let that really stress you out. They don't have confidence yet. They don't know that much about the genre yet. They clearly need this unit. That's awesome, because I don't want to teach a unit they don't need. And so that just proves that what I'm about to teach is exactly what they need. And I love that. And they're going to show so much growth, right? They're going to be some of your biggest success stories. So don't get too worried about that. Give them a time limit. And finally, grade these samples using a simple rubric. It should be the same rubric you're going to use at the end, but it should be simple, that you understand it, your kids understand it. This isn't a grade you're going to put on the report card. You're simply grading it so that you have that baseline number to compare at the end of the unit. I like to give these back to my students, give them a brief explanation of the rubric. I don't go into deep details about it because they just don't know all the skills yet. It'll make more sense to them as we go through the unit. But I make sure they understand, like, you weren't supposed to score really high yet because we haven't learned it yet. And so all the points you got are like bonuses. You already know some of this stuff, which makes them feel really good. But then we set some goals like, okay, where are the areas that you got 0 points on the rubric? That's where we want to make our biggest goals because we can grow the most in those areas. And it helps my students take some ownership right after we do our pre-assessment. All right, pre-assessment, so important, helps us guide our instruction, set our groups, and gives us that baseline. Make sure you do it before each unit. You give a simple prompt, a time limit, and then use a simple rubric to grade those particular prompts so that you have a comparison at the end of a unit. Now, all of my writing units include day-by-day lesson plans that include the pre-assessment, the prompts, the rubrics, everything you're going to need to know. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link to my writing units, which I have for grades 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to put a link in the description of this video so that you can check them out. It might make things a little bit easier for you in your writing classroom. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. We keep adding more and more video content that we hope will make teaching just a little bit easier for you in your classroom. Have a not so wimpy day.